Can a one-loss Georgia team still make the college football playoff? That's what we're going to be talking about in today's video. Now, I know there's a lot of football left, a lot of big games this weekend, a lot of, potential chaos still to happen in college football, but let's jump into it, right? Let's dive into it. Everyone's been talking about it all year long, basically, especially this week, but, Georgia's got a big game against Tennessee. They're number one in the rankings right now. I still think they can go to the playoff if they lose to Tennessee and beat Alabama in the SEC championship game. We're going to talk about more of all this. I'm going to go down the list and kind of break down what has to happen for Georgia to be able to get into that college football playoff with one loss. They've got Tennessee this weekend. I think they're going to beat Tennessee. We talked about it all week long, right? Going up there, Tennessee's kind of falling apart a little bit. Bad loss to Missouri. Georgia's playing better and better. They're healthier. Georgia's going to win that game. If they beat Alabama, of course, they're in. They're number one. But if they lose to Alabama, then I think Alabama should be getting in. But a one-loss Texas in their championship game, right? It needs to be over Alabama. So much going on. But we talked about Georgia, what they have. Ohio State's number 2. They have Minnesota at home this weekend. Could get a little tricky. The Buckeyes should win that game. Then they have Michigan on the road. Then they probably have Iowa if they beat Michigan in that conference championship game. If Ohio State runs the table, they're in. If they lose to Michigan, I think they might be out. I'm starting to think the loser of that game will not get into the college football playoff. And it could be the same way with that SEC championship. I just don't see Alabama and Georgia getting in with one loss. They're going to need Washington to lose a game. Right now, Washington is ranked 5th. They're 10-0. Washington goes to Oregon State this weekend. Tricky game. I think Washington's the better team, but if they lose that, I think they're out, right? Same with Oregon. If they lose to Oregon State later, they're out. They would have 2 losses, but a one-loss Washington, conference champion Washington, do they get in over Georgia if Georgia's only losses to Alabama, right? That's when you start talking about who gets in over who. Florida State should run the table. If they lose, they're out. They have North Alabama this weekend, should win that game by 100. They've got Florida the next week. The Gators are falling apart. I don't see Florida State losing to Florida. But then it looks like they'll play Louisville in the ACC title game, unless I have that completely wrong. Should be Louisville. They lose that game, they're done. I think if they go undefeated, they're going to have to be in. We've got 5 undefeated teams right now. And again, if you're Washington, you run the table, you're in. Florida State, you run the table, you're in. Michigan and Ohio State, you run the table, you're in. So if none of those teams go down, then it could be a one-loss Georgia against a one-loss Texas, right? So on and so on. But if Georgia handles business, they're in, and they're the number 1 seed. They're favored to win against Tennessee, obviously, because I think they're going to win that game. They're going to be favored against Georgia Tech. They're going to be favored against Alabama. So if Georgia's the team that we think they are, they should be able to win those 3 games, number 1 seed, go from there, right? But I think if they lose to Alabama, they're done. I think you might have, but then Alabama might not get in. That's the crazy thing. Georgia and Alabama might be the 2 best teams in college football right now, this second. You could make the argument that Alabama's gotten that much better, that they could be right there with Georgia, 1 and 2 in the country. But there's a scenario, if Alabama wins the SEC title game, they both have 1 loss. Alabama can't get in over Texas, or shouldn't. They lost to Texas, right? You can't put Alabama over Texas, right? I mean, if you go by 100% of the eye test, Alabama looks like the better team. If they were to play on a neutral field right now, I think Alabama would win. But games have to matter, and losses have to matter, especially when you're talking about going against a team to get into that Final Four. You have to give the nod to Texas. So if Washington runs out, Florida State wins out, Texas wins out, and Ohio State or Michigan went out, then it'd be crazy to imagine a one-loss SEC champion not getting into the playoffs, but we're at that position. Now, we've said for a while, I think Texas could lose a game. Texas is ranked number 7 right now. They have Iowa State, who I think is 6-4 right now. Could be a tricky game. I think in another video, I picked the Cyclones to win, so let's jump on that bandwagon still. Iowa State over Texas this weekend. Texas will be done. Texas lose another game, they're out of here. Boom, see ya. Another choke of a season. Can Oregon sneak in? Oregon is number 6. If they went out, 1 loss, Pac-12 champion, do they get in? I'm starting to think no, But there was a while this year where it looked like the Pac-12 was the best conference in college football. This really could go down to a wild, crazy finish. It's all going to come down to, that Michigan-Ohio State game for one spot. Georgia-Alabama. Georgia wins. They're out. Or they're in, excuse me. Alabama's done with 2 losses. If Alabama wins, you've got Georgia and Alabama sitting at the same spot. Alabama would have to be, get the first nod. But if Texas loses another game, they're out. I think if Washington stumbles, a one-loss Washington conference champion, they've got a real shot and an argument. But it's there's still a lot at play. When if Ohio State or Michigan lose to the other one in overtime, right? That would be their only loss of the season in overtime against the top 3 team. One loss, you could argue that they're still one of the best 4 teams. This could be a wild, wild finish to the season. I'm glad I'm not on the committee. But again, is it eye test? Is it resume? It's a little bit of both, right? If that's how it should be. But if Georgia takes care of business, they're in. Same with Ohio State and Michigan. Went out, you're in. Florida State, there's no reason why they should lose to... They can lose to Louisville. I don't think they can lose to Florida. Washington has, at Oregon State, could be a toss-up game. I think the Beavers are favored in that game. They've got Washington State at home, then the Pac-12 title game against Oregon. Of course, the loser of that game is out. The winner of that, if it's Oregon, has an argument. If it's Washington and they're undefeated, they're in. They're number 5 right now, but of course, Michigan and Ohio State have to drop. I don't really care what the rankings say right now. Those rankings are going to sort it all out because a few of these teams still, have to lose a game and will be eliminated. But if you're Georgia, got to beat Alabama. Got to beat Alabama again. Every time they play Alabama, the stakes are high. And in this case, I think the stakes could be a spot in the college football playoff. If you're Alabama, you have to win. You have to win. And if you're Georgia, I think you have to win. If you lose to Tennessee and beat Alabama, they would be the next one-loss team in. I don't care who over loser of that Michigan Ohio State game. Also, real quick, I totally forgot I had a Friday video, so I kind of had to think of this one 10 minutes ago, throw some notes together. So we're going to have some fun with it still. We're going to talk through it. But if you think I'm wrong, which is crazy to say out loud, let me know in the comment section. I love reading those. And this is more of a general conversation than me telling you what's going to happen. I'm not on the committee, right? We're just talking through it, thinking of scenarios, and just going with it, right? But at the end of the day, a one-loss Georgia to Tennessee, obviously, they would have an argument, but they could still get left out. If you're Georgia, you got to take care of business. There's no other way around it. Now, I think every team 1 through 8 still has a chance to get in, right? We're sitting at Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, Florida State, Washington, Oregon, Texas, Alabama. The 8 teams right now are the only teams I think can get into the top 4. After that, I don't think one-loss Louisville is going to get in. Missouri 8-2 is not. If you're Oregon State, they've got 2 losses. So even with wins over Washington and Oregon, which would be crazy, don't think they're getting in. So we're down to an Elite 8, right? A final 8 with 2 weeks left in the regular season. A lot of chaos to be had. I could see Washington going down to Oregon State this weekend. I could see Oregon State beating Oregon. I could see Louisville beating Florida State. Texas has their conference championship game, will be either against Kansas State or Oklahoma State. Looking at the standings right now, Oklahoma State could beat Texas. Kansas State could beat Texas. So if you're Georgia, you want some chaos. You want as many other one-loss teams out there because a one-loss SEC, if their one loss is to Alabama, then maybe they sneak in with Alabama. But they're going to need a loss to Texas, Oregon, Washington, Florida State, which I don't see happening. But I think if you're the loser of that Ohio State-Michigan game, you could be in some real trouble because you don't have the conference, you didn't even make the conference championship game. If you're Georgia, your only loss is overtime to Alabama, and Washington stumbled, Florida State stumbled, Texas has stumbled, then you're probably going to get in. But that would be some big-time type of scenario. Georgia's got to win their games. They're favored to do all of them. And we've got you covered on the rest of the season over on Dawg. You can sign up. In the description is a link to our newsletter. You can sign up for free and read a lot of the free stories we have over on Dawg. Really appreciate y'all watching these videos. Should be a wild into the season, and we're glad that y'all are part of it with us. But what do you think? Drop your comment in the comment section below. Can Georgia get into the college football playoff with one loss? Does it have to be against Tennessee? Could they sneak in against Alabama? Is anyone else stumbling this weekend? Conference championship game, let me know in the comment section. Really appreciate it, and I hope y'all enjoy the next video. I'll see you over on the website.